Have you ever thought that the food you lovingly reheat for lunch might be slowly harming your brain or even increasing your risk of cancer? It sounds shocking. But what we eat and how we reheat it could be doing silent damage, especially for us in our golden years. Many seniors across India warm up leftover dishes every day. From sabzi to rice, from dal to chicken curry, it feels wasteful to throw food, and reheating seems harmless. But hidden behind this daily habit could be toxins that harm your memory, weaken your digestion, and raise your cancer risk. In this video, I will reveal 9 very common foods that become dangerous when reheated and what doctors are warning seniors to avoid. If you are over 65 or caring for someone who is, this could save your health and even add years to your life. Before we begin, I would love to know, where are you watching this video from and what time is it right now? Please share in the comments below. Even the smallest moment from your day is precious to me. And if you find this helpful, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss these life-changing insights again. Have you ever been in a moment where someone close to you said something so simple, yet it lingered in your mind all day, leaving behind a sense of discomfort you couldn't quite explain? For many older men in India, especially those living in traditional households in places like Jaipur, Chennai, or Varanasi, such moments are more common than one might admit. As we grow older, especially past the age of 60, the heart becomes more sensitive, not just physically, but emotionally. Words, tone, and the subtle messages behind them start to carry weight that younger people often overlook. Take, for example, the phrase, "You should do it this way." It may sound like a suggestion, a gesture of care from a loved one. But for many men who have spent decades being decision makers in their families, hearing this too often feels like losing a part of their independence. Over time, these seemingly harmless comments can begin to wear away at one's confidence, creating a quiet emotional strain that's hard to express. From a psychological standpoint, repeated experiences of being corrected or controlled, especially when disguised as help, can activate chronic stress responses in the brain. The amygdala, which regulates emotions like fear and anxiety, becomes hypersensitive. As a result, the brain starts releasing more cortisol, the body's stress hormone, which when elevated over time can lead to high blood pressure, digestive problems, and even memory loss. In cities like Bengaluru or Ahmedabad, many doctors are now observing this link between emotional well-being and physical health among older patients. A retired bank manager from Coimbatore shared how his blood sugar levels fluctuated not because of sweets, but because of the stress he felt from ongoing tension with his spouse. He said, "It wasn't what she said. It was how often she said it. I began to feel like I wasn't needed anymore." His story isn't rare. It reflects a deeper truth. Emotional wounds in old age are often invisible but deeply felt. Culturally, Indian men have been conditioned for decades to be strong, silent, and in control. Admitting to feeling hurt or dismissed isn't just hard, it feels like weakness. But science now tells us that suppressing emotions can damage the immune system and accelerate aging. Emotional pain doesn't stay in the mind alone. It travels through the body, affecting sleep, digestion, blood circulation, and even how the heart beats. The good news is that understanding this connection between words and well-being is the first step toward healing. Creating emotional space where older adults feel respected, heard, and valued can significantly improve their health. Even simple changes like giving a person more choice over their daily schedule or listening without correcting them can reduce stress markers in the body. For those living in joint families, especially in rural India or tightly packed colonies in New Delhi, communication becomes key. Families must learn not just to care with action, but to care with intention, and that includes respecting autonomy. A man who has lived more than 6 decades deserves to be spoken to with kindness, not correction. So if you are over 60 and you have felt that quiet sting from words meant to help, know this: your feelings are valid. You are not overreacting. You are responding to the slow erosion of something deeply human, your dignity. And the body knows it even if your voice hasn't said it aloud. Health in old age isn't just about medicines or yoga or diet. It's about peace of mind, dignity in relationships, and the freedom to be yourself without explanation. Because in the end, growing old in India should not mean growing silent. It should mean growing into wisdom, strength, and respect from within and from those around you. In many Indian households, especially in quiet towns like Nashik or older neighborhoods in Kolkata, a man in his 70s is often seen as the calm center of the family, someone who no longer leads from the front but gently supports from the side. Yet, what most people don't see is the silent struggle within, where a sense of control over one's life is slowly slipping away, and with it, the dignity that took decades to build. Let us take the story of Mr. Hari, a retired railway engineer from Nagpur who spent 40 years solving complex systems, managing teams, and providing for his family with quiet determination. After retirement, he looked forward to peaceful years tending to his garden, catching up with old friends, and finally spending time on things he once postponed. But gradually, he noticed something changing, small at first, barely noticeable. His wife, out of care perhaps, began questioning his routines. Where are you going now? Why are you meeting them again? Or is it really necessary to spend money on that? These questions, while wrapped in concern, started to carry the weight of disapproval. Over time, suggestions turned into instructions. Decisions about food, money, and even his morning walks were now being subtly directed by someone else. Psychologically, this shift can feel suffocating. According to neuroscience, the brain's fear and stress center, the amygdala, becomes hyperactive under prolonged emotional scrutiny. When a person, especially in later years, is constantly questioned or second-guessed, the body begins to interpret this as a form of threat. It responds by releasing cortisol, a hormone meant to protect us in danger but harmful when produced in excess over time. Elevated cortisol can disrupt memory, reduce emotional resilience, and affect blood pressure, especially in older adults. This is particularly worrying in the Indian context, where seniors already face growing risks of high BP, early cognitive decline, and heart-related issues due to changes in lifestyle and isolation post-retirement. In Hari's case, he started forgetting small things, like where he kept his phone or whether he had taken his blood pressure medicine. He felt increasingly unsure when speaking up in family discussions. His voice, once steady, began to hesitate. His friends noticed he declined invitations more often, preferring to stay home and avoid judgment. This emotional withdrawal is not unique. In many Indian families, especially where the elderly live with their grown-up children, the intention to take care often becomes overprotection, leading to loss of autonomy. And autonomy for an aging individual is not just about choices, it is about identity, mental strength, and the motivation to wake up with purpose. Scientific studies from the Indian Journal of Psychiatry have shown that older adults who feel they have less control over their lives show faster cognitive decline and higher risks of depression. The loss of decision-making power also weakens the immune response, making them more vulnerable to infections, a fact made painfully clear during the COVID-19 pandemic, when isolated elders suffered both emotionally and physically. What changed for Hari wasn't just the behavior around him, but the moment he realized that the love he received must come with respect, not silent dominance. He began to have gentle, clear conversations with his wife, sharing how certain remarks made him feel less like a husband and more like a dependent. He reached out to his old colleague in Pune who had gone through something similar and found support in that shared understanding. Today, Hari keeps a small diary where he writes one decision he made each day, however small, to remind himself that his voice still matters. For anyone over 60 living in India today, whether in cities like Ahmedabad or villages in Kerala, the message is this: you still have the right to be heard, to choose, and to live with dignity. Caring should never mean controlling, and love should never come at the cost of silence. Your peace of mind is not a luxury. It is your foundation for good health, long life, and quiet joy. In the quiet hours of the afternoon, when the streets of Kochi or Lucknow begin to calm and the chai kettle whistles gently in the kitchen, many older men in India sit alone with their thoughts. They reflect on a life of responsibility, hard work, and silent sacrifices. But also, for some, they carry the weight of emotional wounds that no one sees. One of the most overlooked sources of these wounds is not illness or poverty, but the quiet sting of disrespect, especially from someone they share a home and history with. Mr. George, a retired teacher from Pune, lived a disciplined life respected by students, neighbors, and friends. But in recent years, he began to notice that respect was missing in the place it mattered most, within his own home. His wife, perhaps overwhelmed by her own stress, began to speak to him with sarcasm, dismissing his opinions during simple conversations, even mocking him lightly when he forgot a detail or misplaced an object. At first, George brushed it off. He told himself it was just a bad day or tiredness on her part. But over time, those occasional remarks turned into a pattern, and that pattern started to erode something inside him. Psychologically, being repeatedly dismissed triggers a quiet, persistent stress response. According to modern neuroscience, the brain processes verbal rejection or humiliation in the same region where it processes physical pain. That's why disrespect, even if expressed casually, can hurt as much as being physically struck. In elderly individuals, especially those over 65, the ability to regulate stress diminishes with age. When the body is exposed to emotional pressure like feeling belittled, mocked, or ignored, it releases cortisol, a hormone that can interfere with memory, weaken immunity, and even elevate the risk of heart disease. Research from the Indian Institute of Mental Health shows that seniors who report feeling unseen or unvalued by family members often exhibit early signs of depression, anxiety, and cognitive decline. In Indian culture, particularly among traditional households in Tamil Nadu or Rajasthan, the elder man is expected to be the quiet rock, enduring, forgiving, and non-confrontational. But this expectation often silences men from expressing emotional hurt. They carry the burden quietly, which only deepens the damage. It's important to understand that disrespect, whether spoken harshly or hidden in small jokes, eats away at a person's sense of self-worth. And for a man who has spent decades building his identity, that erosion can feel like a slow disappearance. Disrespect is not just about what is said, it's about what is taken away. When someone interrupts you, constantly mocks your ideas, or jokes about your forgetfulness, they are not just playing. They are intentionally or not telling you that your voice no longer matters. Over time, this can lead to a withdrawal from social life, reduced communication, and eventually a sense of isolation that is as damaging to health as smoking or lack of exercise. But there is hope, and it begins with awareness. When George finally acknowledged that these interactions were affecting his health and happiness, he made a small but powerful decision. He sat down with his wife one evening and shared how those remarks made him feel. Not in anger, but in honesty. He said, "I spent my life teaching students to believe in themselves. And now I need to remember how to believe in myself too." That conversation changed everything. The beauty of Indian family life lies in its closeness, but closeness should not come at the cost of kindness. A healthy relationship, especially in the later years of life, must be built on mutual respect, gentle listening, and emotional support. Elders deserve to be heard, not hushed, to be valued, not tolerated. Your words and the words spoken to you carry power, the power to heal or to harm. So if you like, George have been quietly absorbing subtle insults, jokes that sting or tone that makes you feel small. Know that you are not alone. And you have every right to expect better. Emotional health is as sacred as physical health. And in India, where respect for elders is part of our cultural heart, it's time we extend that respect, not just in rituals, but in the way we speak, listen, and care. In the quiet evenings of small Indian towns like Ujjain or Trichy, where life moves gently and people know each other by name, many older men sit in verandas watching the sun disappear behind old rooftops. They appear calm, content, perhaps even at peace. But for some, beneath that calm lies a slow erosion of dignity, brought not by illness or age, but by subtle, persistent disrespect from the people closest to them. Take the story of Mr. George, a 72-year-old retired headmaster from Mangaluru, who once led classrooms with confidence and guided hundreds of students with patience. After retirement, he looked forward to peaceful days, reading the newspaper, tending to his tulsi plant, and enjoying long conversations over chai with his wife. But something began to shift. What once were jokes about his forgetfulness slowly turned into comments that stung. "You always lose things," she would say, "or you're not as sharp as you used to be." These words didn't come in anger, but in everyday conversation, making it harder to notice when the respect began to fade. At first, George laughed along, brushing it off as playful teasing. But as the remarks grew sharper, especially during disagreements, he found himself feeling small, unseen, and increasingly quiet. Psychologically, this kind of subtle disrespect can deeply impact an older person's sense of self. Neuroscience tells us that the brain processes emotional pain, such as being belittled or ignored, in the same regions as physical pain. That means being mocked or dismissed can hurt just as much as a bruise or wound, especially when it happens repeatedly over time. As the brain begins to associate conversations at home with criticism or judgment, it enters a defensive mode. The stress response system activates and cortisol, the hormone released during emotional strain, begins to rise. In older adults, prolonged exposure to high cortisol levels is linked to poor sleep, weakened immunity, memory loss, and even increased risk of depression. For someone like George, who was already adjusting to the changes that come with age, like reduced social interaction, fewer responsibilities, and health concerns, this emotional strain became an invisible weight. He found himself withdrawing, speaking less, avoiding eye contact, and even questioning his value in his own home. These are not just emotional effects, they are also biological responses to an environment that no longer feels emotionally safe. In Indian society, especially among men raised with traditional values, expressing emotional pain is often seen as a weakness. Many older men have spent a lifetime being told to be strong, to tolerate, to stay quiet even when their spirit is hurting. But staying silent about disrespect can make the damage worse. Relationships, especially in the later stages of life, are meant to be sanctuaries, places of rest, understanding, and mutual respect. When that respect erodes, when a person begins to feel mocked, ignored, or spoken down to, the home becomes a space of quiet suffering instead of comfort. Recognizing the early signs of disrespect, such as frequent sarcasm, dismissive language, or being interrupted, is crucial. These are not small matters to be ignored. They are signals that something deeper is off balance. For those listening today who have felt this quiet sting, know that you are not imagining things. You are noticing what your body and mind are already responding to. The good news is that emotional health can be rebuilt slowly, gently, and with awareness. If possible, honest communication can help restore respect. A calm conversation, even over a shared evening walk in the park, can make space for understanding. If the pattern persists, setting emotional boundaries, choosing how to respond, what to absorb, and when to protect your peace becomes a form of self-care. In many Indian homes, we perform rituals for physical wellness: turmeric milk before bed oil, massages, early morning walks. But emotional wellness needs its own rituals: listening with love, speaking with kindness, and remembering that respect is not a luxury. It is a foundation for every healthy relationship, especially in your golden years. To all the George in India who are quietly holding back tears behind smiles, your worth has not faded with time. It only deepens. You deserve to be heard, seen, and spoken to with the respect you've spent a lifetime giving to others. Let that truth be your strength as you care not just for your body, but for your heart and mind too. In the quiet courtyards of Ahmedabad or the shaded balconies of Madurai, many elderly men sit with their backs slightly bent, not just by age, but by years of silent judgment that have worn them down. While outsiders may see a peaceful retirement, inside many of these men carry an invisible burden: the daily weight of constant criticism. This is a pain that doesn't come from broken bones or tired joints, but from broken confidence and a heart that feels increasingly unwanted in its own home. Let us talk about Joe, a retired teacher from Chandigarh who once stood with pride in front of blackboards filled with chalk and curiosity. He had shaped young minds with patience, taught with care, and believed deeply in dialogue. But after retirement, he found himself in a different kind of classroom, one where his every action, decision, and word was graded harshly, not by students, but by the person he shared his life with. At first, the remarks were subtle. "You've worn that kurta again?" she asked. "Why do you always forget things lately?" said in a half laugh. Joe took these in stride, thinking perhaps she was just worried or tired. But over weeks then, months, the comments multiplied and sharpened. His hobbies were ridiculed. His opinions were dismissed at the dinner table. Even his way of spending the afternoon reading a newspaper or chatting with an old friend became a topic of critique. Psychologically, what Joe experienced is not unusual. Neuroscience explains that repeated criticism activates the brain's threat system, the part responsible for fight or flight responses. When this system is triggered frequently, the brain releases cortisol, the stress hormone that prepares the body for danger. While useful in emergencies, high cortisol over long periods leads to damage, especially for older adults whose resilience is already reduced. In people over 65, constant exposure to such stress chemicals can impair memory, reduce sleep quality, and weaken emotional regulation. The brain's prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and self-control, becomes less efficient. That is why many elders, under constant criticism, begin to second-guess themselves, lose interest in activities, or avoid conversations altogether, just like Joe, who gradually stopped speaking up at family gatherings. But the problem isn't just emotional. The effects seep into the body. In Indian seniors, elevated stress has been linked to increased risk of high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and even early cognitive decline. Doctors at AIIMS Delhi have reported that many elderly patients come in with vague complaints like fatigue, forgetfulness, or chest tightness, only to discover that emotional stress at home is a key underlying factor. What makes constant criticism especially painful in Indian families is the cultural silence around it. Many elderly men are taught to endure, to remain composed, to adjust as their roles shift from decision makers to dependents. But the heart doesn't stop needing respect. And the mind doesn't stop needing affirmation. When those are replaced by daily correction and judgment, the sense of self slowly dissolves. The worst part, perhaps, is the feeling of invisibility, of speaking but not being heard, of trying but never doing enough. When someone is constantly told that they're wrong, messy, forgetful, or outdated, they begin to internalize those labels. And soon, even in a room full of people, they feel profoundly alone. Yet the solution doesn't have to be drastic. It begins with awareness, recognizing that constant criticism is not care and that mutual respect is essential at every age. For elders, reclaiming their voice may begin with gentle boundaries, saying, "I hear you, but I need you to speak to me with kindness," is not confrontation. It is preservation of dignity, of peace, and of health. For those listening who may be living like Joe, quietly, politely fading into the background, please remember, your worth was never measured by perfection. You deserve to be spoken to with the same patience and encouragement you once offered to others. A healthy old age is not just about a strong body, but also about a heart that still feels valued and a voice that still matters. And in a country like India, where elders are revered in words, it's time they are also revered in tone. In many parts of India, from the bustling lanes of Delhi to the quiet villages of Uttarakhand, growing old is often seen as a time for rest, reflection, and respect. But behind this ideal, many older adults silently carry emotional wounds that others cannot see. Wounds caused not by illness or age, but by persistent negativity from within their own homes. The source may be a partner who criticizes, often a family member who rarely shows appreciation, or simply the atmosphere of being corrected at every step. Take, for example, Mr. Sharma, a retired accountant from Pune who spent his life balancing ledgers and raising 2 sons. Now, in his late 70s, he finds himself constantly being corrected by his daughter-in-law, from the way he holds his teacup to how he arranges the newspaper on the table. At first, these remarks seemed trivial. But over time, they began to feel like quiet reminders that his presence was more tolerated than welcomed. Science has now proven what Mr. Sharma feels, that chronic criticism is not just emotionally painful, it affects the brain's ability to adapt and remain healthy. The human brain, even in older age, retains a level of plasticity, the ability to form new connections, to learn and to grow. But when exposed constantly to negative comments, judgment, or put-downs, this plasticity weakens. Neuroscientists from the Indian Institute of Science in Bengaluru have shown that chronic stress from emotional strain leads to reduced dopamine and serotonin, 2 chemicals responsible for joy, motivation, and mood regulation. When these fall, a person begins to feel more anxious, less enthusiastic, and disconnected from purpose. In older adults, this can quickly accelerate memory problems, diminish sleep quality, and lower immunity. It is not just the brain that suffers. Emotionally wounded elders often stop attending social events, avoid conversations, and even withdraw from friends or religious gatherings. In cities like Hyderabad or Chandigarh, where seniors once thrived in community parks or satsangs, Many now stay indoors, unsure of how to face the world when they no longer feel respected at home. Criticism, when delivered with care and specific purpose, can be helpful, especially when it aims to solve a problem or protect someone from harm. But destructive criticism is different. It is often vague, repetitive, and deeply personal. Phrases like, "you never do things right" or "you always mess things up" aren't meant to help, they're meant to control. And when heard repeatedly, especially in old age, these words can cut deeper than we imagine. Mr. Sharma's story is not rare. Across India, countless older men and women are adjusting to changing family dynamics, shifting roles, and the deep emotional changes that come with retirement, illness, or the loss of a spouse. In such times, what they need most is compassion, patience, and kindness, not daily reminders of what they can no longer do. But healing is possible. It begins with recognizing the difference between feedback and disrespect, between love and control. Elders must learn to honor their own emotional health, to know when to speak up, when to set a boundary, and even when to take space. Having a simple conversation like, "I don't feel good when you speak to me this way," can shift the energy in a relationship. And if change does not come, it is okay to step back emotionally to protect peace, even if that means creating some distance. Your golden years should be about confidence, not confusion. About self-respect, not self-doubt. Every day you wake up is a chance to choose joy, dignity, and freedom, not because someone allows it, but because you deserve it. Just like a banyan tree that stands tall with age, your presence holds value, quiet, strong, and deeply rooted. So if someone makes you feel less through words, tone, or silence, remind yourself of your worth. You are not here to carry the weight of others' harshness. You are here to live the years ahead with lightness, clarity, and the calm dignity that age brings, in a country that still calls its elders buzurg, a word that means wisdom, not weakness. In many Indian households, where the warmth of shared meals and morning chai once defined the rhythm of daily life, a quiet transformation can sometimes occur. Emotional silence begins to replace laughter, and conversations, once filled with dreams and memories, become distant and mechanical. For many older adults in India, like George, a 74-year-old from Ahmedabad, this shift feels heavier than any physical ailment. It begins with something small, fewer questions about your day, less eye contact at breakfast, or a simple instead of a thoughtful response. And one day, you hear the words that cut deeper than you expected: "I don't care anymore." That sentence, though brief, carries the weight of a collapsing emotional world. It's not merely an expression of anger or fatigue. It's a signal that emotional withdrawal has begun. In psychological terms, emotional withdrawal is the gradual severing of the empathetic connection that holds two people together. It creates not just physical distance, but emotional silence, the kind that echoes in the mind long after the words are spoken. Scientific studies in India, including those from institutes like Nimhans in Bengaluru, reveal that emotional neglect has as much impact on the aging brain as physical illness. When an elder feels emotionally unseen or unheard, the brain activates its stress circuits. The amygdala, the part of the brain that reacts to emotional threats, becomes overactive. Cortisol levels rise. Over time, this constant activation affects memory, slows down learning, and disrupts the sleep cycle. The person might still smile at the neighbor or answer politely at dinner, but inside, a quiet emotional erosion is happening. For elders in India, especially those living in multi-generational homes or adjusting to new family roles, emotional neglect is particularly painful. In cultures like ours, where respect for elders is deeply rooted, the expectation of connection, not just duty, runs strong. When that connection fades, what's left is not just silence, but a feeling of being forgotten while still present. George, who once walked hand in hand with his wife to buy flowers from the local bazaar in Gujarat, now walks alone. Not because she is absent, but because her presence has turned into disinterest. It is important to understand that emotional withdrawal is not the same as needing space. Everyone needs quiet moments. But when withdrawal becomes consistent, when your stories are met with blank stares, your efforts with shrugs, and your pain with indifference, then the very fabric of the relationship begins to tear. In old age, this tear doesn't just affect the heart, it affects the body. Researchers have noted that elders who experience emotional detachment from loved ones show higher risks of cardiovascular issues, lower immunity, and even slower wound healing. In cities like Kolkata or Chennai, many senior citizens have reported that the hardest part of growing old is not physical weakness, but emotional invisibility. When someone you love no longer listens, responds, or acknowledges your emotions, it feels as though your place in the home has become purely symbolic, like a photograph on the wall, present but unspoken to. But emotional distance, though painful, can be addressed if recognized early. One of the most powerful tools available to an older adult is their voice. Expressing feelings calmly, honestly, and consistently is not confrontation. It's self-care. A sentence as gentle as "I miss when we used to talk" can open the door to healing. Sometimes the other person is not even aware of the distance they've created. In other cases, the issue may run deeper, requiring boundaries to protect your well-being. At this stage in life, your emotional health matters just as much as your blood pressure or sugar levels. Relationships, like the air in the Himalayan foothills, should feel clean, supportive, and easy to breathe. If they begin to feel heavy, suffocating, or empty, it's time to pause and reflect. George eventually found his courage to speak, not to blame, but to express. His partner listened, hesitated, and over time they began to rebuild. Not with big gestures, but with small, consistent steps, like listening again, asking again, and caring again. That's the kind of healing that emotional awareness can offer. So if you, like George, have felt that quiet ache of emotional withdrawal in your own home, know that you are not alone. In India, where emotions are often wrapped in silence and sacrifice, it is time to say your feelings matter. Your voice matters. And your peace in this season of life is worth protecting above all. In many Indian homes, especially those in cities like Pune or Lucknow, emotional connection in later life is what keeps relationships warm and meaningful. Yet sometimes, even when both partners are physically present under one roof, the emotional bond quietly begins to fade. You might still eat together, share a bed, and exchange daily courtesies, but deep inside, something has changed. The silence between conversations grows longer. The smiles feel rehearsed. And slowly you realize you are living alongside someone, not with them. Psychologists explain that this feeling stems from what is called emotional withdrawal. It is not just about someone being quiet or having a bad day. It is a deeper form of disconnection where one partner slowly stops engaging emotionally. According to attachment theory, human beings need consistent emotional response and support to feel safe in a relationship. When that support vanishes, the foundation of trust and companionship begins to shake. For many seniors in India, where the home becomes the center of life after retirement, this loss of connection can feel especially painful. As children move out, friendships become sparse, and professional roles retire. The emotional bond with one's partner becomes the main source of comfort and stability. When that bond starts to fray, the emptiness is hard to ignore. Take the example of Mr. Sharma, a retired banker from Indore. For decades, he and his wife had shared stories over evening chai, laughed at old family albums, and discussed even the smallest decisions together. But over the years, he noticed her responses became shorter. Her eyes distant, and her interest in their daily chats faded. One evening, she quietly said, "I don't care anymore." That sentence echoed in his ears for days. From a medical perspective, such emotional detachment does more than just hurt feelings. It triggers the brain's stress response system. When emotional needs are not met, the brain perceives it as a threat to well-being. This activates the amygdala, which then signals the release of cortisol, the stress hormone. Over time, elevated cortisol can disrupt sleep, weaken the immune system, raise blood pressure, and even contribute to heart problems, all of which are already concerns for people above 65 in India. Furthermore, emotional withdrawal can intensify feelings of loneliness and anxiety. For older adults who may already feel forgotten in a fast-changing society, the loss of emotional connection in their closest relationship can make them feel invisible, even within their own home. Communication also begins to suffer. Where couples once shared stories about dreams or fears, they now talk only about household chores or bills. Misunderstandings increase. Disagreements go unresolved. And gradually, what was once a partnership built on love becomes two individuals living separate emotional lives. This emotional distance doesn't stay confined within the home either. Family members and friends often sense the change. During weddings in Delhi or family gatherings in Tamil Nadu, relatives may notice the lack of warmth in the couple's interactions. The teasing remarks, once playful, now seem forced or hollow. In many cases, friends might withdraw, too unsure of how to help, further isolating the couple. Social withdrawal in old age is a serious concern in India. Studies from the Indian Council of Medical Research have shown that seniors with poor emotional support and fewer social interactions are at higher risk for cognitive decline and depressive symptoms. For a nation where relationships are central to identity, emotional isolation can quietly become one of the heaviest burdens in old age. George's story, or Mr. Sharma's, is not rare. Across India, from small towns in Kerala to large metros like Mumbai, emotional withdrawal is becoming more common as stress life changes and unspoken conflicts go unresolved. But it does not have to end this way. The first step is awareness. If your partner has stopped engaging emotionally, not just once, but over weeks or months, it is important to acknowledge it, not brush it aside. Emotional silence is a signal, not a solution. Gentle conversations, perhaps with the help of a family member or counselor, can begin the healing. Sometimes just saying, "I miss our old talks," can reopen a door. Your emotional well-being is as important as your blood sugar or heart rate. In fact, they are connected. A peaceful mind supports a healthy body. In your later years, you deserve a relationship that brings warmth, comfort, and shared joy. If something feels off, do not ignore it. Speak, listen, reconnect. Because your heart, both physically and emotionally, depends on it. In the quiet mornings of many Indian homes, especially in places like Coimbatore or Bhubaneswar, older couples sit together over a cup of filter coffee or cutting chai, reflecting on decades of life shared. Yet, even in these peaceful settings, there are moments when words spoken in frustration can cut deeper than we realize. When a partner says, "It's all your fault," Especially in later years, those words do more than assign blame. They carry the weight of years of unspoken disappointments, unmet expectations, and emotional wounds that may never have healed completely. For many seniors in India, this phrase is not just a complaint about a missed task or a forgotten chore. It often signals a deeper emotional shift from partnership to opposition, from collaboration to criticism. And this shift can be damaging not only to the relationship, but to personal well-being, especially when experienced regularly. Take the story of Harold, a 79-year-old retired postal officer from Nagpur. After a lifetime of service, he hoped to enjoy his golden years with his wife, morning walks in the colony park, visits from grandchildren, and temple trips on festival days. But over time, financial stress and health challenges began to creep in. During arguments, his wife would often say, "It's all your fault," pointing to old decisions, forgotten doctor appointments, or even the decline in their social circle. What once felt like a team effort started to feel like a courtroom with Harold constantly on trial. Psychologically repeated blame acts like slow poison. Neuroscience explains that when a person is blamed frequently, it activates their brain's threat response system. The amygdala, which controls fear and survival instincts, becomes overactive. This releases stress hormones like cortisol, which in the long term contribute to memory loss, weakened immunity, and even hypertension, all common health concerns for elderly Indians. Furthermore, when blame becomes a pattern, it often leads to chronic resentment, both in the person being blamed and in the one doing the blaming. The blamer feels unheard, the blamed feels unloved. This dynamic is particularly toxic in Indian joint family systems or close-knit communities where older adults often have limited private emotional space. When you live under one roof with family but still feel emotionally distant from your spouse, the loneliness becomes even more intense. In Indian culture, where family honor and lifelong marriage are held in high regard, many seniors feel guilty even acknowledging emotional strain. They silently bear the weight of hurtful words, believing that endurance is nobler than confrontation. But silence does not heal blame. It deepens the wound. It's important to understand that blame rarely leads to resolution. From a psychological perspective, blame shuts down communication. Instead of exploring the real problem, like the fear of growing older, frustration over illness, or grief from losing purpose after retirement, blame turns these emotions outward, targeting the other person. The human mind, especially in later years, thrives on emotional safety. Seniors who feel consistently blamed may begin to withdraw, lose confidence in their decisions, and even stop expressing their opinions altogether. This can lead to a dangerous cycle of emotional suppression, which research from the Indian Psychiatric Society links to increased risk of depression in seniors. But the damage is not irreversible. The first step is recognizing that blame is not a solution. It is a signal, one that something deeper needs attention. Open conversations, perhaps with the help of a family elder, a local community counselor, or even during spiritual gatherings at a gurudwara or mandir, can begin to break this cycle. Talking about feelings is not a sign of weakness. It is a step towards healing. Older adults in India deserve relationships that are peaceful, respectful, and emotionally nurturing. You have spent your life giving to your children, your community, and your country. Now you deserve to receive kindness in return. If you notice blame becoming a regular part of your relationship, pause. Ask yourself, is this really about the mistake? Or is there a deeper sadness behind the words? You still have the power to shape your emotional environment, to ask for respect, to speak with clarity, and to choose peace. Whether you live in a small village near Varanasi or in a bustling apartment in Bengaluru, remember the words we hear every day shape our health, our thoughts, and our spirit. Choose to protect yours. Because in these golden years, your emotional dignity is just as important as your physical well-being. In the quiet morning lanes of Varanasi or the peaceful courtyards of Madurai, many elderly couples begin their day with a cup of chai and old memories. Yet, behind these familiar routines, some carry silent wounds, not of the body, but of the heart. One of the most painful, yet often unspoken experiences among older adults in India is the emotional toll of constant blame and resentment in long-term relationships. When your partner says, "It's all